So Angela is an education-focused academic with a strong passion for career-linked STEM learning and workforce preparedness. And currently at Deakin University, she leads the curriculum in chemistry as particularly as in work integrated learning. So I won't say too much about Ange and let her do all the talking. But one thing I want to mention is her fun fact. So sorry, that's my little girl in the background. So a fun fact about Ange is that she speaks, reads, and writes a little bit of Thai, and she loves Thai food. So maybe Angie might be able to just mention what led to this interest, and then I'll hand over to you.
After high school, I lived in Thailand for a year and then I studied Thai later on.
Ah, amazing. So
Yeah.
that's a very different language to know.
Very, very hard for me to learn, having never learnt another language before. It's a steep learning curve. Okay, I'll share my screen. Okay, we look like we're all good. How's my volume?
Very good.
Okay, well, thank you to the organisers of CLEAR for inviting me to speak. I'm very glad to be here and really interested to hear how many ways, in all the different ways that Michael talking has dealt with my thinking in putting this talk together. So it'll be interesting to see if anyone picks up on that or not. I wanted to acknowledge country first. This is a tradition in Australia that's tens of thousands of years old. The First Nations people have always acknowledged country when they are at an event or meeting each other. And so I wanted to acknowledge that I'm joining from the lands of the Wurundjeri people. And if anybody wants to join me by acknowledging where they're coming from and what their traditional custodians or knowledge holders call themselves in their local area, I'd love to hear where everyone's coming from. Okay, so I'm talking about bringing industry flavour to your teaching labs, and this is a bit of a how-to guide. We're not looking at the theory. I'm not going to have a lot of data to present. This comes on the back of me spending many years redeveloping labs, specifically with bringing in some sort of work integrated learning idea, and it's different for every lab that we redevelop, so it's a bit hard to give a summary, but always looking at that laboratory class with that work integrated learning lens. And I still do a little bit of that, but I'm work integrated learning director for essentially our science school at the moment, so looking at all types of work integrated learning. Some people more think of work integrated learning just as placements or projects, but definitely I would say that work integrated learning can be brought into the classroom as well. Having said that, I wanted to start with my thanks for a specific reason, and not because I might forget them at the end, although that is possible. I wanted to highlight that while I'm talking about different ideas or working with companies or how you might get ideas from industry to bring into your classroom, I'm not talking about dozens of people that I've been talking to. Now, I do go to events whenever I can, maybe much less post-COVID. So there is a lot of general information that I glean from talking to people one-on-one occasionally. A one-off, I might not even remember the person's name, just the information. But this is the number of groups that I've worked with in detail. We have multiple relationships. So for instance, Trajan Medical and Scientific, they take our interns. One of their staff members who I used to work with at Monash is also marking our internship reports. We are looking at how we can also use, for instance, how-to videos or training videos that they have for a professional audience in the classroom, which we've done in the past with Metla Toledo. And in fact, that's actually the same relationship, because one of their sales leads moved from one company to another. And so you have the opportunity to develop another set of relationships there. I also wanted to thank Dr. Aaron Gosling, who is one of my friends who happens to have worked in a number of different organizations in different industries. These people are gold if you're looking for connections or just places to bounce ideas off. Most of you probably know Professor Tina Overton, retired now, but she was the one that first recruited me into this work. Dr. Stephen George Williams, who you saw an example of his work in Michael's talk, and Ju Su, who worked with us as an honours student. These redevelopments do make pretty good honours projects too, or masters and PhD projects as a side. Okay, so why would we use industry context? In case some of you are wondering, or in case you want some dot points to take to somebody in your school or faculty to convince them. So these are meaningful and engaging contexts if done well. They're engaging, I would argue, because they are meaningful to the student, and that's because that student can see that straight line right from learning to the workplace. So it's constructively aligned with workplace entry, essentially. We can easily access all the different sorts of products and documents and so on that professionals need to generate in the workplace to have diverse assessments. New labs are really hard to build, I would argue. Fun, but time consuming. But adding really good context actually is nowhere near as hard. And so if you want to teach around a particular concept or aspect, and you want to upgrade it, maybe you've got some limitation, you've got lots of students, you've only got a certain amount of equipment, it needs to happen really fast, all the usual limits we might have, you can still add a great industry context. And as long as that's done well, then it really will uplift the activity. And I should add with that, adding the context, as that goes all the way through from pre-reading and pre-lab activities through to the write-up. It all has to be pointing in the right direction. So it helps us stay relevant using an industry context. If we're regularly going out and having conversations with people outside our industry or outside the university, we will notice when we're talking at odds, or when they're just talking about something different one year. Again, it eases transition. It is an additional prong. This may not be important for you, but it is an additional prong to institutionally wide engagement with that particular industry, firm, person. Now that can be very useful if a group in your university has a research relationship, then having a teaching relationship, having guest lectures, having them talk to you about developing pracs. This can just be extra ways to interact with that company, which your dean may like. New contexts or linkages into industry are relatively easy to introduce, my argument would be. But how do we do all of this? Now, I actually meant to give you a warning. I'm sorry, there's two mentees, and I meant to give you a warning in advance, hopefully because everybody's on a device in order to sign in. It won't be too complicated or time consuming. It was my biggest note on my notepad that's sitting here to warn everyone when I started. So if you wanted to sign in there, I thought it would be good for both myself, but definitely all of you as well, to have some sort of sense of where everyone's coming from. And of course, please tell me in the chat if the other Menti is working. Awesome. Okay, so I'll just wait till we get a couple more responses. Okay, so I guess not surprisingly, we've got a really big mix. I really didn't know what to think, but we have a mix of people, a mix of experiences and backgrounds. So having very varied, almost flat response for that bottom one. Okay, so here I would like to have more industry linkages in classroom. Okay, great agreement on that. Okay, so we've got some people with industry linkage in their classrooms and a varying degree of comfort. Okay, thank you very much. And I mean, if you want to keep answering, I will review that later. Thank you. Okay, before we dive into some specifics, I want to sit back for a sec. And if we're going to bring in these contexts, this industry examples and so on, we are going to want them to remain authentic. But it is important to remember that what we're talking about with authenticity. So, for example, if we're not aligning the assessment to the instruction, we start to have problems. It's not going to appear authentic if we talk about industry context in the pre-lab. We give them an interesting industry problem solving or activity, and then we go and say, here's a standard student report. Doesn't make any sense. So we're not going to do that. The students will need to demonstrate competencies through significant and meaningful tasks. I don't actually think that's a problem, but it's not an exercise in them just feeling like they're doing something industrial. And potentially some of you have seen these land badly. But authenticity is subjective. And so when we talk about authenticity, it's not one specific thing, and it doesn't have to completely emulate a workplace. And context-based learning and authentic learning is often misunderstood, and that may not be by you, it might be by somebody you're trying to convince to join you in an activity. It does not have to be equivalent. It just needs to be analogous. So hence the duck picture, which is honestly a great picture. So we want to mimic a professional role. They don't have to precisely do a professional role. Oh, I had a previous point, but I took it off. So I think a really good example here is, so the National Institutes of Standards, a group like that, most countries have a group like that. If we were setting up some sort of analytical experiment in a NIST lab, we would need high quality controls. They would have to be renewed and refreshed every so often because they go out of date. Now, these controls are terribly expensive, and we could never run a student lab like that. But if you know somebody who runs a lab like that, you can get their out-of-date material to run as your standards. You don't have to say they're out of date. They're still going to work to a quality that a student would use. And then you've automatically got a set of samples that you can say, look, these are NIST samples, and this is what we're going to do. We're going to do an actual industry analysis. And then, it has to be safe. It has to be the right amount of time and so on. But that's a good example of what analogous might look like, not equivalent. Okay, so I wanted everyone to do a little bit of brainstorming now. If you are not having the opportunity to actually change something in the next year, maybe you could have ideas for a colleague, or maybe you could just brainstorm some ideas for when you next get an opportunity. And this is brainstorming who in industry you might talk to about teaching. Some sort of practical activity, I guess, is the focus here. So starting really close to home, who do you have that's a former classmate, somebody you can email, hit up on LinkedIn, maybe you can even call them if you've still got their phone number. Or it might be former students if you have been teaching for a long time. Former students that you have a good relationship with are an amazing resource. They go everywhere in all different places of industry, obviously. And they're also, if you've got a good relationship with them, they're very happy to have a chat, even come in, help, maybe record a video about what they're doing in their workplace, that sort of thing. Another sort of amazing resource that I've seen is the lab suppliers. Now, some lab suppliers are a higher quality of scientists than others, but if you've got somebody that has local salespeople who are chemists, then you've got this opportunity to sit and talk to them. Why is this instrument better? They will tell you, they will buy you coffee and cake to tell you usually. Why is it that they have made a particular advanced version for industry? Why have they changed from this? You know, do they have some experts who might record a piece for your students, and you can sit with them and you can make sure it's level appropriate. We had a weighing specialist come in our own labs, and we recorded video of them explaining weighing at different levels. So a first year video, a second year video, and a third year video. And that activity took maybe an hour or two of prep beforehand and an hour of filming. And then, of course, some insane amount of editing. Well, I slowly lost my mind. But we've got all these really accessible people that are quite close by that we maybe haven't thought of. And research partners may have things that we can interact with. They have to be accessible, though that can be a bit difficult to go through. Okay, really quickly. But don't try and look at the whole problem at once. Just try and do one step at a time. And upgrading of one prac in a year is great if you didn't used to have anything. And even if you did, you know, you've probably doubled the amount you have. Looking at the whole problem in any curriculum redevelopment activity is usually a bad idea, unless you've got the specific set of stuff you must do and specific timelines. And just re-highlighting that one relationship can actually work in several different places. That might be different year levels, that might be different specialties through the same company. I think there's another Menti. Okay, so sorry, the Menti is coming up. Started. What contexts, connections would you like to add to your classroom, and what level? I'm going to go back to that table, but only if I have time. Alex, can you let me know if that time is my 15 minutes or my 20 minutes?
That's the 15 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, just on, yeah. You have a few minutes after that for questions.
Yeah. Okay, so
Yeah.
assuming the Menti is working, what sort of contexts and or industry examples might you want to add? Sorry, I'm just hoping that something is happening in the background. Chemists that code. Yeah. Okay, there's heaps and heaps of chemistry in biological chemistry, in pesticides, in managing what the product the agricultural students are going to be looking at, whether that's a crop, or I like nutritional analysis or not. Okay, that third one is about as I think as big as you could possibly be. Show them what industry is going to look like. I think honestly, if you just added any example that was linked to an industry, that's going to help them start to see. What I find are some of the easiest ones are things like food and consumer products. So if you start there, you should, in a very safe manner, because they're all going to be safe to touch and so on, you should quickly be able to introduce some feel for some industries that actually employ a lot of graduates, food and personal care consumer type products. And that ties into that cosmetics industry. Sunscreen, you could consider sunscreen, great synthesis. There are some JChem papers around that. Ties into the physical qualities that you have of the product quite easily. I'm trying to pick the ones that we can go through fastest. Alternate reporting formats, amazing. Please use executive summaries. Even if you do quite a lot similar, an executive summary talking to a lay audience as a 300 or a 200 word piece as sort of a cover note to your students' submission. The other one is like a certificate of analysis that can really quickly be put together. I'm going to really quickly go back up because obviously we can't talk through all of those. This is a summary of some places that we got our industry sectors from and just a quick example of things that we have done before. There's just one example per. This might be more useful for you as sources. Obviously, dependent on where you are, it'd be highly variable what companies are a phone call away or in your city. Is that the timer?
So
I
sorry,
am
I did
done.
not know the timer made noise.
I am done. I have a thank you and are there any questions slide, but I think it would be much more useful to leave that up if people want to look at that. And as a nod to Tina Overton and also Michael series editing prowess, this table comes from the book that was dedicated to Tina Overton's career.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Angela.
No problems.
I'm
I need music every time I finish talking now.
I did not know the timer made a noise either, but that was pretty funny. Sorry. Thank you so much for that really, what's the word? My brain's not working today. Informative and practical presentation to help people get started in trying to embed industry-related context to their labs. Does anyone have any questions? We have time for maybe one question.
I'm seeing